It's time to stop ignoring. Ignoring is the source of suffering in your life. It's the source of suffering in my life. It is the source of suffering in this world. When you begin to ignore and live in ignorance, that allows pain, evil, misery, all kinds of stuff to exist and to move from something that could have been healthy. So, like, pain can be healthy, but when you ignore it, that turns into something other than pain. It turns into suffering, and that just sucks. So, the first thing that you need to do in your life to begin to become free and become free from suffering and to rise and to transcend is to stop ignoring, to stop living in ignorance. There are lots of things that happen on the periphery of life. There are lots of things that come up that we don't want to deal with. And when you ignore something, that's you taking a thing and putting it into the darkness, thinking that it's going to be fine. It's not going to be fine. If there's a pain in your body and you ignore it, chances are it's going to get worse because there's a reason for that pain. That pain in your body is telling you something. Pain in your life, in your relationships. If you ignore those things, if you turn on ignorance and ignore them, it's going to get worse. There is a reason for the pain, and that pain can be healthy if you embrace it. So, for a long time in my life, and still in some ways, I'm still subject to this as well, but I haven't fully arrived. But I lived in ignorance for a long time. I would ignore things. One example of that was wine and alcohol. So for a long time, I would ignore the fact that whenever I would drink wine at night, I would wake up in a panic attack. And I'd think, maybe, it's not that big of a deal. Maybe just, next time or whatever. And so, like, probably most of the time, I'd either feel terrible, wake up in panic or whatever, and was ignoring that this was a problem. And I was allowing myself to live in pain. I was allowing myself to suffer from that because I was not willing to face the fact that there was this thing that was causing me pain and then deal with it. There's so many things in life that we just choose to ignore. There's things that you need to bring up and deal with. There are things that happen in this world, evils, all kinds of bad things, television shows that you might not watch, whatever. All these things get ignored because we want to justify them. When we ignore moral issues, it creates cognitive dissonance in us, where we create a situation where we don't feel whole. And so when someone says something to us and we choose to take it as it is or just ignore pieces of that we know don't quite seem right and we don't dig into them further, then it starts to create problems in us and that we just don't feel right, just don't gel. So an example of that would be from religion. One that I'll just come straight out and bring up here is the concept that people are born sinners. Like, that is false. To ignore that and just kind of take that in will create cognitive dissonance, because if you're born, when you start to get into this and you start to look at it, you start to question it, how can someone be born already with a bad rap, let's say? And so what happens is people start to make justifications for that. They try to figure it out. Okay, well, maybe that means it's up to a certain age, or maybe if someone's without sin or they're innocent until a certain age, and then they become this way. And so people try to do all kinds of stuff to work around that ignorance. When if they would just take it up, stop ignoring the dissonance, stop ignoring the problem there, and actually kind of engage it, try to figure it out, then that will start to eliminate some of that cognitive dissonance. So, a couple things. Well, there's a lot here, but a couple of things. So when you ignore pain, that will lead to suffering. When you ignore concepts that are false or that just don't have a lot of grounding to them, don't make sense, that can lead to cognitive dissonance. When you ignore problems in relationships, that can lead to divorce, blow-ups, loss of friends, loss of relationship. So all in all, the thing here is that on the journey of awakening and on the journey of rising in consciousness, on the journey of moving out of suffering, you have to stop ignoring. You have to be willing to take a hard look at yourself and your life and acknowledge what sucks, acknowledge where things don't make sense. You have to move out of ignorance and into thinking for yourself and taking responsibility to figure it out. So stop ignoring, move out of ignorance.